In a crowded courtroom, the air is heavy with anticipation as people fill the seats waiting for the next case to unfold. At the front of the room, a black woman named Jessica stands tall, with poise, her hands folded calmly in front of her, her eyes scanning the room as the white judge behind the bench prepares to make a decision she had never imagined she would face in a place like this. Her heart pounds steadily against her chest, but she shows no sign of fear or anxiety, only determination that has carried her through many difficult battles over the years. Despite her calm exterior, there is an unspoken energy about her, a quiet strength that speaks volumes to those who are paying attention around her. The judge glances at his papers, then up at her, with a firm look on his face. His gaze is sharp as he prepares to move forward with the hearing. He has already made up his mind about the case at hand. Jessica had been accused of violating a local ordinance. She had been given a ticket for an action that to most seemed minor, but to some it represented something far larger, something that had the potential to challenge systems that had long been in place. As the proceedings continue, the tension in the room mounts. Jessica knows this moment is not just about the fine or the decision that will be made. It is about something much deeper, something more personal. She holds her ground, waiting quietly for the judge to begin his statements. He clears his throat and begins to speak, addressing the room and the accusations leveled against her in a voice that is filled with authority and certainty. He doesn't seem to acknowledge the fact that Jessica's actions are tied to a much broader issue, one that affects the lives of many individuals in the community, people who rely on the very systems Jessica has fought so hard to change. He doesn't know that Jessica is far more than just a woman in this courtroom. Standing before him as a defendant, Jessica is a force in the healthcare advocacy world. She is a champion for the underserved. She has dedicated countless hours to fighting for affordable health care for those who have none. She has worked with local organizations, tirelessly pushing for systemic change in healthcare access. She has spoken at rallies, she has met with lawmakers, she has spoken out against policies that hurt the most vulnerable in society. She has spent years traveling across the city and beyond, educating families about their rights when it comes to health care, all the while facing challenges herself, from budget cuts to political pushback to the constant pressure of dealing with difficult situations. She has stayed the course, always pushing forward, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Yet none of that is apparent to the judge standing before her in this moment. All he sees is a woman in his courtroom accused of a violation he believes to be minor. It is a moment where everything Jessica stands for, her dedication to social justice and equality, seems to be invisible to those around her. Even though her work has touched the lives of so many, there is no recognition here, no acknowledgement that she is anything more than the woman standing before him today. As the judge continues to speak, Jessica listens intently. His words feel almost distant to her. As she drifts into her thoughts for a moment, her mind flashes back to the countless hours she has spent meeting with families, listening to their struggles, and offering solutions. Her thoughts turn to the meetings with policymakers, where she fought for funding for clinics in underserved neighborhoods. Her heart swells with pride when she remembers the first time she was able to help a family navigate the complex world of healthcare insurance, helping them get the care they so desperately needed. These moments are what truly matter to Jessica, but here and now in this courtroom, her contributions seem invisible. As the judge prepares to announce his decision, Jessica's composure remains unshaken despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. She knows that whatever happens here today will not define her. She will continue to fight for what is right for as long as it takes. The judge looks down at his papers with a sense of finality. His voice echoes through the room as he pronounces the fine on Jessica. The words hang in the air, heavy and certain, his eyes barely lifting from the documents in front of him. As he does so, Jessica remains silent. She doesn't flinch, doesn't shift in her seat, her gaze fixed ahead on the judge, who continues speaking without really looking at her, his words sharp and quick, a clear directive, as if he's already moved on to the next case in his mind. The fine is substantial, and Jessica knows the implications of this decision. It is not just a monetary penalty, but a signal that she is being held accountable for an action that to her feels so insignificant in the grand scheme of the work she's dedicated her life to. Yet she knows how these things work, how they can be used as a tool to silence or to push people like her further into the margins. The judge makes a motion, as though to signal that the matter is settled, and for a moment, the room feels still, as though everyone is waiting for some kind of reaction from Jessica. But she doesn't provide one. She stays rooted in the moment, a silent force in the room, her expression calm and composed despite the deep stirring of emotions within her. She knows this is not the time to make a scene, to argue against a decision that has already made. Her body remains still even as her mind races through the possible courses of action ahead. The judge doesn't seem to recognize the weight of his decision, nor the depth of the person he is addressing here today. He sees only a defendant, a person caught in the gears of the system, one who has made a mistake and now must pay the price. Yet Jessica is far more than that. She is a woman who has been tirelessly working for years to change the way systems treat those who are often forgotten and left behind. It is in this moment that Jessica's true strength lies. She doesn't need to explain herself. She doesn't need to justify her worth. She simply knows that this is just one moment in a much larger journey. Her purpose remains unchanged. She will continue the work she started long before this courtroom, and she will continue it long after this moment passes. The judge looks at her now, seemingly expecting some sort of response, but Jessica remains silent, her gaze unwavering. She has nothing to prove to him, nothing to defend. As he stands from the bench, signaling the end of the case, she remains seated for a moment longer, taking in the weight of the situation, the injustice of it all, but also a sense of peace, knowing that she will not let this moment define her. Her fight is not here in this courtroom. It is out there in the world, where real change is needed, where people like her are standing up for what is right and pushing for change. She stands up slowly, making her way to the exit, her heart still racing, but her steps deliberate and strong. As she moves through the crowd, her thoughts swirl. As she leaves the courthouse, she knows this fight is far from over, but it is in moments like this that she is reminded of why she fights in the first place. Not for recognition or accolades, but for the lives of those who have no voice, for those who are overlooked and dismissed. She will not stop. She will not be silenced. As Jessica walks out of the courthouse, the weight of the fine seems lighter in comparison to the weight of her thoughts. She feels a mixture of frustration and resolve as her shoes click steadily against the pavement. The cool air rushes against her skin, but it does little to calm the storm inside her mind. As she walks past the busy streets filled with people going about their daily routines, none of them know who she is or what she stands for, and for a moment she wonders if they ever will. But then she remembers the countless families she's worked with over the years. Their faces flash in her mind, the gratitude in their eyes when she helped them navigate the maze of healthcare options, the stories of struggle and perseverance she's heard time and time again from those who have been neglected by the very systems they trust to care for them. And in that moment, Jessica knows that her purpose has always been clear, no matter how small the recognition, no matter how many times she's dismissed by those who don't see her as a person with a voice that deserves to be heard. She has a mission that is bigger than any courtroom, and any fine she's ever been given. The fine is just a blip in her journey, a challenge to push through, not a roadblock to her cause. Still, it lingers in the back of her mind, the feeling of injustice, the realization that her work has always been seen as secondary by those in positions of power. They don't understand the value of what she does. They don't see how the healthcare systems they champion often fail the very people they claim to serve. But she knows she can't give up. She can't afford to let these moments of frustration or dismissal deter her from the work that matters most. As she rounds the corner, she spots a small cafe on the corner and decides to take a break. She slips into a seat by the window and orders a cup of coffee. Her hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of the courtroom experience, she takes a deep breath and sips the coffee, feeling its warmth settle in her chest. She stares out the window, watching people walk by, absorbed in their own lives, none of them realizing the battles that are being fought behind the scenes for their well-being. As she watches them, she can't help but think about the injustice that exists in the world, and the way people like her are often seen as less than worthy of being heard. She thinks about the long nights she spent fighting for policy change, the endless hours she spent at community meetings trying to make her voice heard, and yet here she is sitting in this cafe feeling like an invisible woman in a world that constantly overlooks her. Still, She knows that it's these very moments of struggle that will only strengthen her resolve. She's not here to be seen by everyone. She's here for the people who need her. She's here for the families that are depending on her to continue the fight. She is no longer waiting for validation from the world outside. She is validating herself with each step she takes forward. She knows that the work will never be easy, that there will always be people who don't understand or appreciate her mission. But she also knows that the work she does is worth it because she has seen the change it can bring. She has seen the difference in people's lives. When they have access to the care they need, when they no longer have to choose between health care and food, she remembers the first clinic she helped establish and the look on the faces of the families who walked through its doors. They were no longer forced to suffer in silence. They had a place to turn to, a place where they were treated with dignity and respect. That was her victory, not the fine, not the judgment of a single person in a courtroom, but the impact she made in the lives of the people she fought for. As she finishes her coffee, she stands up with a renewed sense of purpose. She won't let this moment define her. She is bigger than that. She is a force for change, and she will continue to fight for those who need her most. As Jessica steps out of the cafe, the noise of the city surrounds her, but it feels distant, somehow like she's stepping through a barrier between the world she knows and the world she's fighting to change. She takes a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp air, trying to center herself. The judge's words all seem insignificant now compared to the bigger picture. The real battle lies not in courtrooms or legalities, but in the lives of those who have been forgotten by the system, in the shadows of the city, the families who have no access to the resources they need, the children who go to bed hungry because their parents can't afford both food and health care. She thinks of the faces she's seen over the years. Those faces keep her grounded. Those faces remind her why she does this work, why she continues even when the odds are stacked against her. She remembers a conversation she had with a single mother named Elena, who had reached out to Jessica after being denied health care coverage for her son who had a chronic illness. Elena had fought for months to get the treatment her son needed, and despite all her efforts, the system kept pushing her back until she found Jessica. Elena's eyes had been filled with tears when they first met, but after Jessica helped her navigate the system, Elena left that meeting with a sense of hope she had never known before. Jessica had called the insurance company, directly advocated on Elena's behalf, and made sure the boy got the care he desperately needed. It wasn't just a victory for Elena, but a victory for Jessica, a reminder that even small wins can make all the difference. Jessica knows that not every day will be a victory, but she also knows that every day she fights, someone's life gets better. She crosses the street and heads toward a community center where a meeting is scheduled. She's been part of this particular effort for months, working alongside other activists, healthcare professionals, and lawmakers to bring more funding to clinics in low-income neighborhoods. The need is dire, the lack of resources is crippling, but Jessica is relentless. She won't stop until every person has access to the care they deserve. As she enters the community center, she's greeted by familiar faces. The team she's been working with is already set up, ready to begin the discussion. She can feel the energy in the room, the shared passion, the collective desire for change. This is where she belongs. These are the people who understand her mission, the people who fight alongside her every day. The conversation begins as they dive into the details of the upcoming proposal, a plan to push for more equitable distribution of healthcare resources in underserved areas. Jessica listens intently, her mind sharp and focused. She offers suggestions, she asks questions, she makes sure every angle is covered, because she knows the stakes are high, lives are on the line. And the work they're doing here could change the future for so many people in need. It's easy to get lost in the frustrations of the system, the setbacks, and the constant opposition from those who have the power to make decisions that affect so many. But in moments like these, when she's surrounded by a team that shares her vision, Jessica feels the weight of her work transform into something more manageable, something more powerful, because she knows she is not alone in this fight. Together, they are stronger than any obstacle that may stand in their way. The meeting continues late into the afternoon, and when it finally wraps up, Jessica steps outside into the fading light of the day. She feels a sense of accomplishment, a quiet satisfaction in knowing they've made progress today. The plan is one step closer to becoming a reality, and it will make a difference for families who need it most. As she walks home, the weight of the fine still lingers in her mind, but it doesn't weigh her down as much anymore. She has bigger things to focus on, and she knows that the path she's on will lead to greater change than any courtroom ever could. The next morning, as Jessica wakes up and prepares for another busy day, she can't shake the feeling that something has shifted since the court hearing yesterday. There's an unease in the back of her mind, something nagging at her, but she can't quite place it. Still, the day ahead is filled with meetings, calls, and planning sessions for the healthcare initiatives she's championed for years. She dresses quickly and grabs a quick breakfast. Before stepping out the door, her mind is already consumed with the tasks at hand. But as she walks through the city streets on her way to the office, something catches her eye: a local newsstand with headlines screaming the latest stories on politics and social issues. Something draws her in, and she picks up a paper without thinking. As she flips through it, her eyes catch a familiar name there in black and white. Is a report about her case. The headline reads, "White Judge Finds Black Woman Unaware of Her Healthcare Advocacy Role." Her heart skips a beat, and she feels a rush of surprise and unease. As she continues reading, the article paints a picture of her in a way she's not sure she recognizes. It describes her as a woman who has spent years fighting for healthcare access for marginalized communities, but it also emphasizes the fact that she was fined for a violation. The judge's ignorance of her background seems to be the central point of the article, as though the real story here is that the judge didn't know who she was. The article briefly outlines her work in the healthcare advocacy world and the impact she's made, but it also goes into detail about the court case. Her face is plastered across the page, and for a moment Jessica feels vulnerable, exposed, as if the very purpose of her work is being reduced to a courtroom drama. But it's not just the way the story is framed that bothers her. It's the fact that she's now thrust into the public eye in a way she never expected. She has always worked quietly behind the scenes, fighting for the people who need her, but now it feels as if her life is on display for everyone to scrutinize. There's a part of her that feels deeply uncomfortable with the attention. It feels strange to see herself described this way, to be the subject of a story that focuses more on the fine than the work she does for the community. Still, as she continues to read, she can't help but notice the comments and reactions from the public. Some are sympathetic, others are critical, but what catches her attention the most are the responses from the people who have read about her work, the people who have been impacted by her advocacy. They're sharing stories of their own struggles with healthcare and thanking Jessica for the work she's done. It's as if the very story meant to highlight the judge's mistake has instead sparked a conversation about the larger issue, the systemic inequities in healthcare that Jessica has been fighting against for so long. The story has begun to take on a life of its own as people who had never heard of her before begin to rally behind her cause. And within moments, the phone calls start to come in from people she's never met. Some are reporters asking for more details. Others are members of the community reaching out to express their gratitude. Some even share their own stories of hardship and ask for her help in navigating the system. It's overwhelming, but also heartening. Jessica feels a mix of emotions as she takes it all in. Part of her wants to retreat from the sudden attention, but another part of her is reminded of why she does this work, why she's willing to face the challenges and the scrutiny, because even in moments like this, when everything feels too big to handle, the work is worth it. She thinks of the family she's helped and the difference she's made in their lives, and she knows that this moment is just another opportunity to reach more people, to bring awareness to the cause that matters so deeply to her. As the day unfolds, Jessica finds herself in a whirlwind of phone calls and interviews. As the story about her case continues to gain traction, it's a strange new reality for her to navigate, but through it all she remains focused on her mission, the fight for healthcare equity and the people who need her most. Even as the world around her seems to shift and change, she knows that the work is far from over. This is just one chapter in a much larger story that she is determined to continue telling. As the days go by, Jessica starts to realize that the attention she's receiving is not just a passing moment. It's something bigger than she initially expected, something that is shaping the conversation about healthcare access and the inequalities that so many face. It's not just the news outlets that are buzzing, but social media as well. People are sharing her story from every corner of the internet, adding their own voices to the conversation about the systemic issues she's been fighting against for years. She's both overwhelmed and humbled by the outpouring of support. But there's also a feeling of discomfort that lingers. She never asked for this kind of recognition. She never sought the spotlight. Her work has always been driven by a desire to help others, not to be put on display. But now here she is at the center of a national conversation, and she can't ignore the gravity of it all, the pressure to perform, to continue advocating, and to show up for people who are counting on her is immense. But Jessica has always known that change doesn't come without its challenges, and this moment feels like yet another test of her resilience. She spends hours on the phone answering calls from reporters and speaking with community members, all eager to hear her perspective on the issues at hand. Despite her growing discomfort with the attention, Jessica knows that the story isn't about her. It's about the families, the children, the elderly people who are slipping through the cracks of a broken healthcare system. It's about the patients who can't afford their medications, the single mothers who can't take their kids to the doctor because they don't have insurance, the working-class families who are burdened by medical debt. The fight she's waging is for all of them. And that's what keeps her going when the spotlight feels too bright or the questions too invasive. She focuses on the people who meet her and the lives she's working to change. The phone rings again, and Jessica glances at the number on the screen. It's an unknown number, but she answers anyway, her voice steady as she greets the caller on the other end. The woman introduces herself as a journalist from a national news outlet and immediately dives into questions about the recent court case and Jessica's thoughts on the judge's actions. Jessica listens carefully as the journalist presses her for more details about her background and the work she's done. But there's something in the way the questions are framed that doesn't sit right with her. It feels like the focus is on the sensationalism of the fine and the judge's ignorance rather than the real issue at hand, healthcare equity. She can feel the frustration building inside her, but she takes a deep breath and calmly redirects the conversation back to the cause she's been fighting for. She talks about the millions of people who lack access to affordable healthcare. She talks about the disparities in treatment between communities of color and others. She talks about the policies that are keeping people from getting the care they need. She speaks passionately and unapologetically because she knows this is the moment where her voice can make a difference, and she can't waste it on something as trivial as the fine or the judge's mistake. She refuses to let the narrative be about her. She insists that the story be about the people who need change and the systemic failures that are perpetuating the inequality she has witnessed for so long. As the interview wraps up and the journalist thanks her for her time, Jessica feels a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she was able to steer the conversation back to the real issues. Even though it's exhausting to be in the spotlight all the time, she knows that every interview, every call, is another opportunity to amplify the voices of those who have been ignored for too long. She finishes her day with a feeling of quiet pride, knowing that her story has started to resonate with more people than ever before. But even more than that, she knows that the work is far from done. The fine may have sparked this moment, but it's the ongoing fight for justice that will continue to fuel her every step of the way. As the weeks go by, Jessica finds herself immersed in a whirlwind of advocacy efforts fueled by the growing attention surrounding her case. She had anticipated that the initial media buzz would fade, but it only seems to be intensifying with each passing day. There are new stories being written, new platforms reaching out asking for her perspective, more opportunities to speak up and continue the conversation about the systemic healthcare injustices that affect so many people. She hadn't expected this much attention, but now that it's here, she knows she can't shy away from it. The weight of responsibility sits heavy on her shoulders as she realizes just how many people are watching her, how many are counting on her to continue this fight she's been fighting for years. But now it feels like the entire world is paying attention in ways she never imagined. As the phone rings again, she picks it up without hesitation. It's another reporter, this time from a major news outlet, asking for a follow-up interview. Jessica has done dozens of interviews over the past few weeks, but there's something different about this one, something that feels more personal. She agrees to the interview and arranges a time to speak later that afternoon. As she prepares for the interview, she sits down to collect her thoughts, wondering what angle the reporter will take today. Will they focus on the fine again? Or will they continue to push for the same sensationalized narrative that has dominated the headlines so far? She knows she needs to be ready for anything, But she also knows she has an opportunity to speak her truth, and the truth of countless others who are suffering because of the broken healthcare system. She's determined not to let this platform go to waste. When the interview finally happens, she can tell right away that this reporter has a different approach. They're more focused on the human side of the story, asking Jessica about her motivations, her background, and the people who have shaped her into the advocate she is today. They ask about the families she's helped, the communities she's served, and the personal sacrifices she's made over the years. Jessica answers the questions with a sense of calm, but also with passion. She talks about the long nights she's spent working to connect people with the care they need. She talks about the late-night calls she's received from panicked parents, unsure of where to turn for help. She talks about the systemic issues that have been in place for decades and how they continue to harm those who are already vulnerable. Her voice is steady, but there's an intensity in her words, a raw honesty that resonates with the reporter and the people listening. She doesn't sugarcoat anything. She doesn't pretend that the fight is easy or that the road ahead is clear. She knows better than anyone that change is slow and often met with resistance, but she also knows that it's worth it because the people who need her can't afford to wait any longer. As the interview ends, Jessica feels a sense of relief. She's been able to speak her truth in a way that feels right, but there's still more work to be done. The court case, it all feels like a distant memory now compared to the work she's engaged in today. The stories she's heard, the lives she's touched have taken over her thoughts and her energy. There is no time to dwell on the past because there are too many people who need help right now, too many families who are struggling with the same issues she's been fighting for so long. Jessica picks up her phone again, scrolling through the messages that have come in over the past few hours. There are requests for her to speak at rallies, to testify before committees, to offer her insights on policy changes. There's no shortage of work for her to do, and she embraces it all because she knows it's all part of the larger movement toward justice, the movement toward healthcare equity, the movement toward a system that works for everyone, not just the privileged few. She takes a deep breath and sets her phone down, feeling the weight of everything pressing against her, but also feeling a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that every step she takes is one step closer to making the world a better place, even if it's just a small part at a time. As Jessica walks through the crowded streets of the city once again, she feels a calmness settle over her despite the chaos around her. There's a quiet resolve in her heart that has grown stronger with each passing day. The media attention, the interviews, the pressure to always perform, they've become a part of her life now, but they no longer define her. They no longer feel like burdens. Instead, they feel like opportunities to keep pushing the conversation forward, to shed light on the injustices that far too many people face every day. Her focus has shifted from the noise of public opinion to the deeper work that still needs to be done. She knows that the spotlight will eventually fade, but the fight for healthcare equity will never stop. It will continue until every person has access to the care they need, until the systems that perpetuate inequality are dismantled and rebuilt in a way that serves everyone. She steps into her office and sits down at her desk. The phone buzzes with a new message from a community leader asking for her help on a new initiative, a new policy that will provide greater access to mental health services in underserved areas. It's just one piece of the larger puzzle, but Jessica knows it's a step in the right direction, and she's eager to help however she can. The work never stops, and for Jessica, that's exactly how it should be. There are still so many families to help, so many communities that are being overlooked and left behind. She can't afford to stop now, and she won't. As she reflects on the journey so far, she realizes just how far she's come, from the quiet woman working behind the scenes to the advocate now known across the country. It's been a long road, but it's been worth it. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt has only strengthened her resolve. She remembers the moment in the courthouse when the judge handed down the fine and how small and powerless she felt in that moment. But now, looking back, she realizes that it was a turning point, a catalyst for the work she's doing today. The fine didn't break her, it pushed her to keep going, to fight harder, to use her voice in a way she never had before. She's become a symbol for the cause she's been fighting for. But that's not what matters most to her. What matters is the people she's helping, the families who now have access to the care they deserve, the children who are no longer forced to suffer in silence, the elderly who no longer have to choose between medicine and food. These are the victories that keep her going. These are the faces she sees when she thinks about why she started this work in the first place. As Jessica finishes another day at the office, she looks out the window and sees the sun setting over the city. It's a beautiful sight, but it's also a reminder of how much work is still ahead of her. There are new battles to fight and new challenges to face, but she's ready for them. She's been ready all along. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been hers, and with every step she takes forward, she knows she is making the difference in the world, one person at a time. As the city lights begin to flicker on and the noise of the streets continues outside, Jessica gathers her things and heads home, her heart full of purpose and determination, knowing that the work is far from over and that no matter what happens, she will never stop fighting for the people who need her most. She will continue to advocate for those who have been forgotten by the system, and she will never let the world forget the importance of healthcare equity for all.